My name is Peter. I'm from Boston with the Committee of Correspondence to inform you about this current war that we are at with England, to break away from this unnatural relationship and to have independence. Well, as you know, in the year 1760, King George III came to the throne during the French and Indian War, and he had a new agenda on his mind. He wanted to appoint prime ministers wanting to have a particular tax towards the 13 colonies. Now, a new prime minister of England made his proclamation of 1763, canceling all previous land grants given to the colonies by past kings and parliaments west of the Appalachian Mountains, for we were not able to colonize further than these Appalachian Mountains. Now, perhaps you remember this. In 1765, the Stamp Act passed Parliament, requiring all colonists to purchase stamps for government agencies for all legal documents, wills, bills of sales, licenses, pamphlets, newspapers, notes, and letters. Great uneasiness arose in the colonies. Why? Because we were not properly represented in Parliament, breaking English law, which I would get into more about later. Now, in 1766, the Stamp Act was successfully repealed. On the same day, the Declaratory Act was adopted, saying our colonies are subordinate to the Crown of England, and that Parliament had the power, yes, the power, to pass laws to bind the colonies in all cases whatsoever. Now, many of the colonies refused to pay these taxes. Charles Townshend, the new prime minister, considered it a rebellion and suspended colonial legislatures in New York, Virginia, and Massachusetts. He then levied more taxes called the Townshend Acts. For these taxes were on our colonial imports from Britain: paper, paint, lead, and tea. Now, this not only threatened our self-government here. For the longest time since our forefathers in Plymouth Rock and Jamestown, we have been rather self-governed. We have been doing quite well up to when King George III came to the throne. Now, during the Townshend Acts, Britain established a board of customs to see that the taxes were collected in Boston, and created special courts to try custom violators without a jury. Yet again, breaking English law. See, our rights as Englishmen should be the same here as it is in Britain. If we are underneath that same crown, would you not think that we would have the same rights? Makes sense, doesn't it? No, they have been infringed. For any trial, there should be a jury. Not for these. No jury. So you know the old saying when it comes to taxation. No taxation without representation. Not only was there not a jury, but we had no representatives in Parliament representing the colonies. Pamphlets and letters circulated in opposition against the Townshend Acts, and pretty soon, refusing to buy British goods, boycotts, and violence followed throughout many of the colonies. As a result, British sent troops here into Boston, where violence was the worst, on October the 1st of 1768. I remember that day. I was there in Boston, and we watched as these British troops came in, playing fife and drum, as if they won a victory. Now, we started to realize why, after the French and Indian War ending in 1763, there were 10,000 troops, British troops, left here in the colonies. For they were not here to protect us from small threats of French and Indians on the western frontier. No, they were left in our towns along the seaboard. There was no threat of hostilities there. For this whole time, especially our militia during the French and Indian War, we proved to be more competent than the British soldiers themselves. So we had more, we didn't have much dependence upon them for our protection. We took it upon ourselves to affect us. But now we know why they have been left here, to bring us into subjection of the king. March the 5th of 1770, I was in Boston again, going about my own business, and I saw there's a group of schoolboys about your age throwing snowballs at a British sentry who was there at the customs station, who cried for help, and British troops came to his aid, and many Bostonians came to watch this great scene of drama. Well, pretty soon, a lot of the Bostonians started to harass the British troops, and somebody on the British side gave the order to fire into the crowd, killing 5 unarmed citizens. But this made us very angry, for not only are troops stationed here in times of peace, but now they have killed civilians. Later in that same year, 1770, the Townshend Act was successfully repealed, except the tax on tea. Peace resumed temporarily. Samuel Adams, a patriot, warned us that it is not the end. There will be more troubles coming. And he put letters into newspapers to warn the colonies. And he also suggested that a committee of correspondence be formed in Boston. Do you know what the job of the committee of correspondence is? Simply to inform the local towns of the current ongoing problems with England. And not only just the towns, but other colonies and the rest of the world. So the world may know from our perspective what's going on. Pretty soon, committees of correspondence started to pop up in all the 13 colonies. Now in Boston, there's a ship full of tea that had a rather heavy amount of tax on it. You, sir, would you like to pay a 30 to 60% tax on tea that you weren't even represented for in Parliament and it passed, and now you have to pay it? No, didn't think so, nor did we. So we talked to the royal governor, Thomas Hutchinson, petitioning to him to send this ship back to which it came from, back to Britain, for we did not want to pay this tax. But he insisted. He wanted us to pay it. And oh, also, by the way, do you know royal governors were not often voted in for, but they were placed in by Parliament, only having more of a British leaning, not wanting to hear our petitions from the colonies. So me and some friends of mine, all younger men, we went out on the night of December 16th of 1773. We boarded the ship, dressed as Indians, mohawks, so that people wouldn't recognize us. We went on there, broke open the chest of tea, excuse me, and threw the contents overboard into the harbor. And there's so much tea in that harbor from those 340 cases, that harbor turned brown. But we made our point clear. We did not want to pay this tax that we were not represented for. Again, no taxation without representation. We cleaned up everything, made it all nice and neat, because we only wanted to make this point clear. We didn't want to hurt anybody, just wanted to make this point. We went out saying this: "Rally Mohawks, bring out your axes. Tell King George we'll pay no taxes." Well, of course you know, as we knew, the British were outraged by this. The royal governor was then replaced by General Thomas Gage of the British Army. And now, the colony of Massachusetts was placed under martial law, losing all traditional rights of Englishmen. After this, the Coercive Acts came upon us. Under the Coercive Acts, there was a new quartering act, making it legal for British officials to quarter troops in occupied buildings, in our homes. And let me tell you, these British troops were not very moral nor pure, for often our women's chastity was violated by these troops. Also, underneath the same Coercive Acts, the Boston Port Bill came out, closing the entire port of Boston to all types of commerce. This had such a great impact on our economy, on this flourishing town. See, we depended very much upon our commerce with other colonies and other nations. But with this, in effect, it stopped everything. Something happened. The other 12 colonies started to send wagon trains of supplies and aid, food and livestock to us, As far away as South Carolina, we had sheep coming. There was a unity coming between all these colonies. Now, you might have heard about the Battle of Lexington Green, April 19th, 1775, a little more than a year and a half ago. I was there with John Parker, the commander of the militia. See, the British were planning to make a move into Lexington to take out our Patriot leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock. But we decided to take a stand, me with John Parker and roughly 70 other militia. He told us, John Parker, to stand your ground. Don't fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have war, let it begin here. Well, the British officer came rather elegant on his horse, telling us to disperse, you rebels, you villains. But we stood our ground. After we thought we made our point clear, we turned our back and started to make our way home. A shot went out. Nobody knows who fired that shot, but it caused the British to fire upon us, shooting several of our men in the back. 10 were injured, 8 were killed. This is the beginning, or was the beginning of this war for independence. But today, let me tell you, today's June the 16th of 1776. Well, about a week ago, June the 7th, Richard Henry Lee presented a resolution to Continental Congress stating, resolved, that the United Colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. Perhaps Congress will now appoint a certain committee to put together an official list of grievances documenting these facts of our rights, those grievances, and our independence. This could be coming very soon. But now let me ask you, General George Washington of the Continental Army is in need of troops very much, and supplies and aid. And if you're not able to join his troops, would you be willing to join your militia? You, sir, would you be willing to join the militia of your town? Thank you for your service. And you, sir, would you be willing to join? And let me remind you, we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for these rights. But why? So that generation may enjoy, the children, so they may not have to fight through what we are going through. And let me tell you this, we must look to the Lord God Almighty for his divine providence in this matter. For we are not barbarians as troops, but we should be civilized. We should be good and still have courage, not animals. Have you ever heard of patriotism? Perhaps you have. Well, let me tell you, patriotism is the love of one's own country. For those men who are fighting, and you two gentlemen who have joined, are you ready to display your patriotism? Thank you very much.